This video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Hit the link in the description, go to surfshark.deals/we'reinhell, or use the promo code we'reinhell, all one word, no apostrophe, at checkout to receive 83% off for 2 years plus 4 months for free. Hey everyone. For this video, I'm going to be taking a little break from my ongoing series where I've been dissecting trash reality shows from a sociological perspective because I'm tired. I'm so tired. Now, do not get me wrong here. We very much will still be talking about trash today. But for this video, I decided to get into the holiday spirit by rooting around in the dumpster and finding some holiday trash. That's right, my last video got demonetized and age restricted because I talked about dangerous ideas like the physical act of love. So for this month, I'm pandering for views. I mean, talking about Christmas. The movie we're going to be talking about today is a pretty weird one. Have you seen in season 2 of I Think You Should Leave, there's that sketch where Santa is starring in an action movie?
They killed your whole family.
Hey, Chief, those safety cages.
With Linda Easley as Monique.
He said he'd kill us both.
Ryan Tanner as Sergeant Wilkes.
I don't like the looks of this, Crashmore.
I don't care if I die at all.
Starring Santa Claus as Detective Crashmore.
That's a real movie. Fatman, released in 2020 and starring Mel Gibson, is a movie about Santa who, having fallen on hard times, accepts a contract to manufacture weapons for the US military while an assassin hired by a naughty child tries to hunt him down and kill him. And we're gonna talk about that today. I'm Jewish and come from a pretty secular household, so Christmas was never really a thing for me or my family. I was never even told that Santa was real growing up, which led to me acting like a fucking 9/11 truther on the playground. I barely watch movies at all, and least of all Christmas movies, so I'm going in a little blind to this, so please forgive me if I make any mistakes here. I'll do my best, but I can't promise that I won't, get things wrong or act like something super weird and then get 100 comments from people being like, actually everyone has a stuffed elf that their parents convince them is watching their every move. That's normal. Except, with something that's real and not just some ridiculous example I made up. Fatman was written and directed by the brothers Ian and Isham Nelms. Before they started making movies, Ian was pursuing a career as a wrestler, while his brother Isham was trying to become a professional paintball player, which, dudes rock, While the budget for Fatman was still relatively small, this was the Nelms brothers' first major movie. Not to be too mean here, but a really funny thing in all the coverage of the movie is how the brothers wrote it 14 years ago, but it was just too good to get made.
Our reps would get us in with that script, and we'd go to places where they'd be like, okay, this is good, but you guys can't make this.
I don't really know anything about the movie business, but that sounds like they were just being rejected nicely. Yeah, I keep applying to jobs and they're always like, you're good. You're damn good. But we're going with someone else. That said, while I'm gonna be pretty critical of the movie here, it's not terrible. Although, unfortunately, a big part of that is because of Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson is a terrible person. He's described himself as an ultra-conservative, is extremely anti-choice, has been accused of domestic violence, he's driven drunk an insane number of times, said unbelievably racist shit in a voicemail released by his daughter, and has spouted absolutely batshit anti-Semitic conspiracy theories multiple times. Not to mention the movie The Passion of the Christ, which he directed, co-wrote, and produced in 2004, which is also, just like Mel Gibson himself, extremely anti-Semitic. Also, the guy he cast as Jesus is now a full-blown QAnon adrenochrome truther. Now, to be fair, this was all while he was a very severe alcoholic, which obviously affected his behavior. That said, while alcoholism is a horrible disease, it doesn't make you be a bigot. With that out of the way, let's dive into this weird-ass movie. But before we do, let me real quick tell you about this video's sponsor, Surfshark VPN. Now, while I don't personally celebrate Christmas, from my limited understanding of it, there's no truer way to celebrate this time of year than by taking steps to improve your online privacy. That's what you Christians do, right? Just hang out together beside a roaring fire and run penetration tests? Anyways, for those who don't know, Surfshark essentially creates a private internet connection for you, either at home or out and about, allowing you to keep your online activity hidden from hackers, trackers, and those goddamn ISPs. I'm not sure what makes me sound more Canadian, the way I say about or how much I hate my ISP. Not only that, but with Surfshark, you can change your IP address, tricking sites like Netflix to get all sorts of great region-locked content. Best of all, if you hit the link in the description, go to surfshark.deals/we'reinhell, or use the promo code we'reinhell, all one word, no apostrophe, at checkout, you'll get 83% off for 2 years, plus as a holiday promotion, if you get in there before the end of December, you'll get an additional 4 months for free. Alright, back to the summary of Fatman, which absolutely no one asked for. Full spoilers, by the way, although, while this isn't that bad a movie, it's definitely best enjoyed as like a dumb thing to watch with friends, so I don't think this will ruin it for you. Although I would say that, wouldn't I? Fatman has 2 intersecting storylines. The first one that we're introduced to is the big bad of the movie, Billy, a rich but neglected child who's turned to a life of naughtiness. By that I mean, after coming in second instead of first place in a school science fair, he hires an assassin to kidnap and torture the winner into conceding.
Billy, I thought that your science... You were gonna return the first place ribbon and tell them you were unfairly helped with that train project.
It's worth noting here that the movie is marketed as an action Christmas dark comedy. So like, the weirdness of what I just described is intentional, but it's all played very straight, which is extremely weird. Like, I like dark comedy, but there aren't any jokes in that scene. It's just actually a child being threatened with torture. Then there's Santa, or as he's exclusively referred to in the movie, Chris. I'm not calling him that though, because everything that happens is way funnier if you only call him Santa. So in the movie, Santa has fallen on tough times economically. How is that possible, you may ask? Well, in Fatman, all the gifts that Santa delivers are paid for by the US government in order to drive holiday spending and stimulate the economy. Now, I don't want to make this into a bunch of gotchas, right? Like, I'm not trying to have a heel turn and become a communist CinemaSins here, but like, that's a wild premise that raises a lot of questions, none of which are answered in the movie. First of all, I can suspend my disbelief and accept that Santa is real, but am I seriously expected to also buy that this is a realistic world where the US government has embraced Keynesian economics? I don't think so. Also, there's a part of the film that's set in Canada and shows a little kid playing with a toy he got from Santa. So then, does the US pay for toys to every country on Earth? Are there trade deals for this? Does the US trade embargo with Cuba include Santa not delivering Christmas presents there? Are Americans in the world of Fatman criticizing the government for sending gifts to Saudi Arabia, even though human rights abuses should put them on the naughty list? Plus, they aren't even Christian. Also, what about other religions? Are there other religious figures in this world, or is Santa the only one? Is there a Christmas apartheid thing going on where Santa just openly discriminates based on religion? Or do other religions just not exist in a world where Christian deities are objectively real? I'm sorry, I watched this movie like 4 times making this script. I'm allowed an unhinged rant. That's the deal. But anyways, one thing that is clear is that Santa isn't getting enough money to cover his expenses because there are too many naughty children now.
I want what's due, and this is half.
Well, you only produced half of last year's product, and
I can't help it if half the kids deserve coal instead of presents. We got a minimum budget. It's in our contract.
And also, look, I realize it's a bit of a cliche to say this, and I also know that in Hollywood, unlike on LeftTube, not every movie needs to be a scathing critique of neoliberalism. In fact, it's almost like none of them are. But I feel like it's kind of worth mentioning here how revealing it is of the movie's underlying ideology that rather than making a criticism of austerity where even Santa is having his budget cut, instead the problem is that participation awards and the rap musics are making kids be bad now.
Well, this is Christmas. We're not handing out participation trophies.
By the way, that was the 3rd funniest line in the movie, and I don't think that it was supposed to be. Also, we're moving on to whiskey sours now. I feel like that's a festive drink, right? This is gonna be one of my drunker videos for sure. One really weird part of the movie is that Santa is never really jolly at all. Instead, he's this grouchy conservative boomer who listens to conservative talk radio, then goes to a bar to grumble to whoever will listen about the decline of society or the reckless youth in America.
Here we have a story out of North Carolina. We have 2 children said they were just having fun when they dropped a bowling ball off the Hickerson overpass. I mean, this caused a 30-car pileup.
Merry Christmas, Chris.
School kids are lighting their uncles on fire and throwing bowling balls off of bridges.
Not in your usual chipper mood today. It's been a whole 2 seconds and I haven't heard anything about the decline of society or the reckless youth in America.
Guess I'm just having a good day.
Genuinely, everything he says feels like it's meant to be reacted to by your conservative uncle who's disappointed no one reacted to his Let's Go Brendan Christmas sweater as he softly mumbles, "Amen to that," into his 5th mug of eggnog and PBR. Anyways, a bunch of government bureaucrats come and try to convince Santa to start working with the military, but he basically tells them to fuck off. He then spends all day on Christmas Eve making calls, but no one will hire him, including, I think, Elon Musk?
Elon, this is Chris. What do you got for me?
There's a part where he complains that everyone's outsourcing now.
I bet on everything from mainframes to Pez dispensers. Everybody's outsourcing.
But how would hiring Santa not be outsourcing too? The North Pole is contested territory between Canada, Denmark, and Russia, so Santa isn't even American. There's also a really fucking weird scene right after this where Santa comes home from delivering presents with 2 bullet wounds. Again, there's no joke here. It's just a very somber scene where Santa washes and bandages 2 gunshot wounds.
How'd it go?
I survived.
It really feels like this was made by people with such a limited imagination that the coolest thing that they could think of was just, what if everything was like war? Anyways, back to Billy, who I want to emphasize we last saw torturing a girl so he could cheat at the science fair. But yeah, also, this is important later, but he pays for the assassin that he hires by stealing money from his rich yet feeble grandmother. Wakes up on Christmas morning to a lump of coal and swears vengeance against Santa. Just the most deranged response possible. I just feel like if you've knowingly committed several major felonies, surely you know that you'll get a lump of coal at that point, no? So the kid hires the assassin to kill Santa, who he also has a weird thing about. Like, in his free time, he collects items that people got from Santa as gifts.
Do you have something for me?
Yes, I do.
We'll walk over here and bring it to the table. On the mat.
I like how this guy's just like, yeah, not sure what I was expecting from the mysterious classified ad looking to buy gifts from Santa, but this is for sure the most serial killer-y way that this could have turned out.
11?
11. That's great. You know, I never got what I asked for. What do you think your childhood dream is worth?
The assassin hates Santa because Santa never got him what he asked for as a kid, which was for his mother to stop violently abusing him.
You know what I got for Christmas when I was your age? You never forget the smell of burning flesh and menthols.
Which, I mean, Santa knows everything and works for the government. You'd think that tipping off Child Protective Services would be a nice side hustle he could pick up instead of becoming a defense contractor, right? At one point, he says that Santa only ever brought him one thing.
You remember this? This was the only goddamn thing you ever got me.
I'm sorry, son. There are limits to what I can do.
Which I think means that every year this kid wrote a letter to the North Pole asking for his abuse to stop, and Santa was just like, damn, guess you get nothing. Like, not even a train set or something as a consolation prize?
Well, this is Christmas. We're not handing out participation trophies.
Anyways, there's this really funny montage where the assassin is trying to figure out where Santa is by reading old books and studying Christmas movies, and then after days of this is like... and then just murders a bunch of mailmen to get Santa's P.O. box number.
I'm looking for the fat man. Where is he?
Excuse me?
Santa Claus, motherfucker.
Like, did you really need to buy all those old, expensive-looking books just to figure that out, dude? Meanwhile, Santa and Mrs. Claus have an argument about money. You know, Santa's extremely cynical and says how he should have licensed his image, and his wife is saying how, like, that's not who they are, and that, like, they'll find a way to make do.
Christmas generates $3 trillion in the U.S. alone. We can't even pay our power bill. You think there's something wrong with that?
Oh, is that how we're measuring success now?
We're a business. And don't kid yourself, Ruth. Altruism is not a deductible on their bottom line.
Don't put it all on them. You've changed too.
You might be right.
Sorry, also just, this scene is actually important for what I'm going to be talking about later in the video, and I doubt many of you have seen this movie, but like, I hope you're enjoying this because I feel like the absolute worst guy at a party who's trapped you in a horrible one-sided conversation where I'm just explaining the plot of Fatman. So, sorry about that. Anyway, the scene ends with Santa leaving and saying,
all I have is a loathing for a world that's forgotten.
Now, this scene is actually, like, very important for the themes of the movie, and I want you to try and guess what the message of this whole thing was. And just hold on to that, because I don't think that it's what you think it is. So after that, through teary eyes, Santa informs his elves that he's accepted the government's offer and that they will now be manufacturing weapons for the US military.
Well, as you already know, there is a rising number of our youth making poor decisions. Now, to make up for that shortfall, we are fulfilling a 2-month contract with the US military.
The thing that's really interesting about this is that this is very clearly presented as bad through the language of the scene.
You will be fingerprinted, assigned a security badge to be worn at all times. Next. Number 2, you must enter and exit the factory floor through the southern bay doors only. Number 3, you must remove the bells from your uniforms as they will set off our metal detectors.
What kind of toys are we making, sir?
Not toys, miss. Control panels for America's Eagle of the Sky, our FJ-63 fighter jets.
But the film never gives us any reason for why it's bad for Santa to manufacture weapons of war. For one thing, the elves who Santa was so worried about letting down are like completely fine with all of this. There's even this weird subplot between the general and the head elf where the general keeps getting blown away by how much more disciplined and efficient the elves are, and like, the elves honestly kind of give off some low-key fascist vibes.
Captain Jacobs.
7.
7?
We're all ranked and accounted for by number. It's more efficient that way.
What happened to 1 through 6?
Well, we've been at this a long time.
We don't reissue numbers. That would be unethical and dishonorable.
I like it.
Also, coming back now to that exchange between Santa and Mrs. Claus, after Santa gets paid for the military contract, he comes home all happy, and that's the resolution.
How'd it go?
Got it.
Like, they have sex after that, and she's like, "There's the man I married."
Well, we always wanted a bigger bed.
There's the man I married.
So I'm not sure why he didn't want to work with the military, since we never get any indication that it's weighing heavy on his conscience, and it literally solves every single one of his problems with absolutely no downside. I mean, I guess there is a certain amount of realism to that, but when Mrs. Claus said that they'd find a way to get by somehow, I definitely didn't think that the message was going to be that things will be so much better once you abandon your principles and collect the bag. Now, real quick, it is probably worth mentioning that a big part of why Fatman is like this is probably because the US military has creative control over how they're depicted in movies and TV shows. For anyone who's not aware of this, whenever you see tanks or jets or something in a movie, those were loaned to the production by the actual military in exchange for editorial control over how they're portrayed in the movie or TV show or whatever. If, for instance, a filmmaker wants to be critical of the military, they're going to have to convince the production company to take on the massive cost of getting their own tank. This effectively serves to censor all depictions of the US military in American media. Now, while all this stuff with Santa is going on, the assassin has just been driving through Canada on his way to find him until he finally makes it to Santa's compound, takes out all of the soldiers, and has his final confrontation with Santa. So I don't really think that the big showdown between Santa and the assassin is a particularly interesting fight scene or just scene in general, but it's worth mentioning here because it's like important for the plot and more importantly includes the second funniest exchange in the movie.
I've come for your head, Fatman!
You think you're the first? You think I got this job because I'm fat and jolly?
Absolutely deranged. I love this so much. Basically, I can't show this on YouTube, but the conclusion of the fight has Santa about to fully beat the assassin to death with his bare hands when the assassin gets the upper hand and then shoots Santa in the head before then being killed by Mrs. Claus. And then it's fine in the end because Santa's immortal, so it was all okay. After this comes what is, by a wide margin, the best scene in the movie. We're back with Billy, whose grandma has figured out that someone is stealing her money, which you probably shouldn't have paid your assassin with forged checks, buddy. And so Santa walks in on Billy trying to murder his grandma by poisoning her milk, and then the funniest part of the movie happens.
Billy. Well, I can't say I'm surprised. Yeah. Fentanyl. That'll get the job done.
That owns so hard. I take back everything. This is a perfect movie. After that, Santa tells Billy that if he's ever naughty again, I guess Santa will just murder this kid.
One more time, Billy Winnan. If anybody that crosses your path is made to feel less or lower because of you, I'm coming back. I'll come while you sleep and rip you from your covers.
And like, fair enough, I guess. Billy is obviously a very bad kid, but then the movie ends with Santa and Mrs. Claus saying how this is the start of them becoming proactive, which, what the fuck does that mean? Like, sure, Billy deserves to face consequences for his actions, obviously, but the film ends on the happy ending that from now on, Mel Gibson will just beat all the naughty children in the world? But yeah, that is just how the movie ends. Now, we're going to come back to Fatman soon, but before we do, I'm gonna have to lay some groundwork here, and so we're going to talk, unironically, about the true meaning of Christmas. One of the things that comes up a lot when people talk about this kind of thing is this idea that crass consumerism has taken over the true religious meaning of Christmas. But when we look into the history of the holiday, it's a bit more complicated than we would assume. So to start out, I know this is some like baseline high school atheist fedora shit, but for anyone who got laid in high school, personally, I was saving myself for college. I think it's fairly common knowledge at this point that the holiday of Christmas has a fair amount of its roots in pagan practices. But when you dig into that, it's a lot more than you would think. That's right, YouTube. I'm about to blow your minds by saying that Christmas was made up. So for one thing, Jesus' birth is just not really a thing that's talked about in the scriptures. It's only mentioned at all in just 2 of the Gospels. A big reason for this is because birthdays just weren't really a significant thing back then. It was much more often the date of your death that people cared about, particularly in the cases of martyrs, and especially when you're a martyr who rose from the grave. But also, while Jesus' birth does at least get some mention, the date December 25th absolutely does not. And in fact, anthropologists who've studied this think that based on what information we do have, Jesus was probably born sometime in May. That's right, Christians, your Lord and Savior's a Taurus. That's the whole joke. I don't know anything about astrology. The reason why Christmas is celebrated on December 25th is actually just because it coincides with the winter solstice. For those who also don't know anything about astrology, the winter solstice is the shortest day of the year, after which days start getting longer again, and it's a huge fucking deal even now. Like, the sun going down before 5 p.m. fucking sucks. So you can imagine how apeshit ancient pagans went to celebrate the sun defeating its seasonal depression and days getting longer again. The early Christians realized that there was no way they were going to be able to convince people to stop celebrating the solstice, and so instead, they bullshitted up a Christian knockoff holiday called Christmas. But this is just the tip of the Christmas's fake iceberg. It gets so much weirder from here. One thing is that nothing I'm saying is like a fringe edgelord conspiracy theory. There are almost no scholars who dispute any of this, and what's more, the church agrees with this too. During the 1600s, the newly formed Protestant church didn't like that people were celebrating this sketchy bullshit holiday, and so they started a war on Christmas. And they fucking won, as Christopher Deasy writes.
During the Reformation period, extreme forms of Protestantism denounced the festival, quote, as a popish, uncanonical extravagance. In the 17th century, the Puritan founders of America even went so far as to ban Christmas. Indeed, in 1644, Christmas was proclaimed a day of penance rather than a day for idle feasting, on the grounds that there was no reference to it in the Bible and it was not celebrated in the early church and was of dubious pagan provenance. In Britain too, Parliament at the time of Cromwell met as on any other day of the year, and Christmas was struck from the list of holy days, with ministers who preached on Christmas Day even risking being sent to prison.
And that was that, literally for about 200 years. Christmas didn't vanish, of course, but it wasn't a big deal. Like, you were weird if you celebrated it. According to the historians John Goldie and William Perdue, Christmas was significantly less of a thing than Valentine's Day. Like, we're talking International Dolphin Appreciation Day status here. But this all changed in the Victorian era with, I fucking shit you not, Charles Dickens writing A Christmas Carol. Like, not single-handedly, of course. Big cultural shifts like that never really just have one single cause. More generally, Victorian society as a whole kind of repurposed this then obscure holiday to fit with values surrounding family and togetherness. But legit, Dickens played a big role in popularizing this. What is very significant, though, is that this absolutely was not due to any change in the policies of the church. People just started celebrating Christmas again on their own, and religious authorities had to play catch-up. Just like, yeah, good, Christmas, that is a thing that we do. And while Dickens wasn't single-handedly responsible for bringing back Christmas, A Christmas Carol is absolutely the basis for the modern Christmas story, which is weird because it's not a particularly religious story, right? Like, Dickens was very much a Christian, but it's not like Scrooge sees the error of his ways and then goes to church or something. He just buys people presents, and that's kind of the founding myth of modern Christmas. Like, it's really funny when people complain about someone taking the Christ out of Christmas, because it's never been there to begin with. Now, I want to take a moment and say that this is not me trying to own Christians or say that Christmas isn't a real Christian holiday. I think that it very much is religious and Christian, just not in a way that relates back to any Orthodox scriptures. DC points out how the format for pretty much all Christmas stories, starting with Dickens and still present today, is essentially as follows. Christmas is presented as a time of the year when the border between the real and the unreal is weakened, and then a person in need of some form of spiritual guidance encounters some part of that unreal and is transformed for the better in the process. And that definitely sounds like a religious story to me. The other thing to go into is how Santa Claus fits into all of this. I'm not going to do the whole weird history of the evolution of the character of Santa, but something that is really funny is how St. Nicholas has kind of always been this incredibly popular saint with almost a superhero-like status to him. While the real St. Nicholas was Bishop of Myria in Asia Minor from the year 280 to 342 CE, he was also the patron saint of Unmarried women, orphans, students, poets, travelers, seafarers, pawnbrokers, bankers, butchers, millers, merchants, grocers, brewers, tanners, candle makers, firefighters, apothecaries, the falsely accused, and childless couples. Even centuries after his death, tons of news stories kept coming out where he'd rescue kids from shipwrecks and go on treasure hunts. Think of him as Jack Sparrow mixed with a cool youth pastor. Oh, and he was an exorcist who literally raised the dead. Even when the Protestants tried to ban the worship of saints, they couldn't get rid of St. Nicholas, who survived as a kind of folk hero. This is all to say that when we talk about St. Nicholas, we are generally very much not referring to the real historical figure. But when it comes to our modern day Santa Claus, probably the biggest difference between him and St. Nicholas is that Santa is never associated with Jesus. You never see the two together, really, and on the rare occasion when you do, it's weird. If you went into someone's house and they had this picture up, you wouldn't be like, oh, they're a Christian. You'd be like, oh no, they're making a statement. Or look at how in Christmas movies, where it's pretty standard to include, even in an otherwise completely secular movie, a quick ending shot of Santa's sleigh in silhouette flying across the night sky. But I don't know of any movie where the statue of the baby Jesus in the manger winks at the camera as they fade to black. There's kind of two theories about this. One is lame and says that they're really the same person. Ugh! The idea is that Santa is sort of a simplified, kid-friendly stand-in for Jesus. One thing about this comparison that's kind of weird is that parents, I don't think, generally want their kids to keep believing in Santa into adulthood, but presumably would for Jesus. The other theory, which I like a bit better, is that Santa and Jesus occupy separate competing turfs, representing different versions of Christianity. As Max A. Myers writes,
"The chief icon of the American Christmas, Santa Claus, is a symbol of a very different kind of grace than is preached by Christianity, in the respect that the grace preached by Christianity is connected with the execution of a leader whose messages threatened those who held political and social power, whereas the grace represented by Santa Claus legitimates the institutions of political, economic, and social power."
It's worth noting that while A Christmas Carol does encourage generosity and charity, as is now standard for Christmas stories as a whole, it never challenges the root causes of poverty. For instance, at the end of A Christmas Carol, Scrooge's charitable donations are emphasized much more for the redemption they've granted to Scrooge than for any good they've done for their recipients. Although, of course, Christmas is about other things, namely celebrating family and togetherness, central to the modern celebration of Christmas is the idea that, contrary to what is taught by more radical forms of Christianity, not only does hoarding vast amounts of wealth not preclude you from properly participating in the celebration, it is to some extent necessary, provided that that wealth is used in the right way. It's kind of ironic how the original solstice holiday of Saturnalia was about overturning and inverting every social hierarchy. But the contemporary celebration of Christmas, which has largely come to replace it, is instead about maintaining those hierarchies. Coming back to Fatman now, I genuinely think that this movie does a really interesting inversion of the classic Christmas story. Rather than the usual story where, through the magic of the season, the supernatural world intervenes to provide spiritual counseling to someone in need of it, instead, in Fatman, it's the real world that intervenes and transforms the spiritual one. The person who gets most transformed by the events of Fatman is the Fatman himself, Santa. Throughout the movie, forces from the material world continually visit Santa, intervening to change him in some way, either by altering his business practices, as in the case of the military, or by shooting him in the eye, in the case of the assassin. By the way, I've been calling him the assassin this whole time. In the script, his character is actually referred to as the skinny man. He's very explicitly framed through the movie as a mirror inverse of Santa, an explicit avatar of the cruelty and violence of the real world which Santa is forced to match in order to overcome. And I know what you're gonna say. But Santa transforms Billy by scaring him into being good and transforms the skinny man by killing him. To this I would say, first of all, Santa does not kill the skinny man, Mrs. Claus does, you fucking clown. But also, I would argue that those two characters do a lot more to change Santa, both by causing him to adopt his new proactive approach to disciplining children, as well as by physically transforming his appearance to one that's more suited to the horrible world that Fatman is set in. This reading also gives us, I would say, the darkest explanation for why Santa manufacturing weapons was depicted as bad, which is because it wasn't bad. Santa was just wrong. The point of Fatman, I think, is Santa learning to let go of his loathing for a world that's forgotten and instead become cruel enough to fit into that world by getting proactive, as well as manufacturing bombs to be dropped on the very people who he's the patron saint of. Sorry for ending off on a depressing note, as usual. I'm bad at writing conclusions, so I'll just finish this by saying happy holidays and thanks for watching. Here's a poem by Al Purdy.
Across Roblin Lake, 2 shores away, they are sheathing the church spire with new metal. Someone hangs in the sky over there from a piece of rope, hammering and fitting God's belly scratcher, working his way up along the spire until there's nothing left to nail on. Perhaps the workman's faith reaches beyond, touches intangibles, wrestles with Jacob, replacing rotten timber with pine thews, pounds hard in the blue cave of the sky, contends heroically with difficult problems of gravity, sky navigation, and mythopoeia, his volunteer time and labor donated to God, minus sick benefits, of course, on a non-union job. Fields around are yellowing into harvest, nestling and fingerling are sky and waterborne. Death is yodeling quiet in green woodlots, and bodies of 3 young birds have disappeared in the subsurface of the new county highway. That picture is incomplete, part left out, that might alter the whole Dürer landscape. Gothic ancestors peer from medieval sky, dour faces trapped in photograph albums, escaping to clop down iron road with matched grays, work-sodden wives groping inside their flesh for what keeps moving and changing and flashing beyond and past the long frozen Victorian day, a sign of fire and brimstone, a 2-headed calf born in the barn last night, a sharp female agony, an age and a faith moving into transition, dinner cold and new-baked bread a failure, deep wood shiver and water drops hang pendant, double-yolked eggs and the house creaks a little. Something is about to happen. Leaves are still. 2 shores away, a man hammering in the sky. Perhaps he will fall.
Leave me the fuck alone. This Christmas time, I don't want your presents. I don't want to give you mine. Sweet gifted garbage.
to cancel Christmas. I really like Christmas. It's nice. Like, you get together with family. The gift giving is nice too. Honestly, I just needed like an ironic, sort of cynical tag to the end of this video, and this is what I came up with. So yeah, here it is.
We should cancel Christmas this year. I don't need all the lights. It's just a corporate tragedy. Maybe red and green from their eyes.
And like, here it's just gonna loop again because I couldn't find a good transition.
We should cancel Christmas this year. I don't need all the lights. It's just a corporate tragedy. Maybe red and green from their eyes.
And like, here it's just gonna loop again because I couldn't find a good transition.
We should cancel Christmas this year. I don't need all the lights. It's just a corporate tragedy. Maybe red and green from their eyes.
And like, here it's just gonna loop again because I couldn't find a good transition.
We should cancel Christmas this year. I don't need all the lights. It's just a corporate tragedy. Maybe red and green from their eyes.
And like, here it's just gonna loop again because I couldn't find a good transition.
We should cancel Christmas this year. I don't need all the lights. It's just a corporate tragedy. Maybe red and green from their eyes.
And like, here it's just gonna loop again because I couldn't find a good transition.
We should cancel Christmas this year. I don't need all the lights. It's just a corporate tragedy. Maybe red and green from their eyes.
And like, here it's just gonna loop again because I couldn't find a good transition.
We should cancel Christmas this year. I don't need all the lights. It's just a corporate tragedy. Maybe red and green from their eyes.
And like, here it's just gonna loop again because I couldn't find a good transition.
We should cancel Christmas this year. I don't need all the lights. It's just a corporate tragedy. Maybe red and green from their eyes.
And like, here it's just gonna loop again because I couldn't find a good transition.
We should cancel Christmas this year. I don't need all the lights. It's just a corporate tragedy.
gonna loop again because I couldn't find a good transition.
We should cancel Christmas this year. I don't need all the lights. It's just a corporate tragedy. Maybe red and green from their eyes.
And like here it's just gonna loop again because I couldn't find a good transition.